Turning now to Michigan, where the two men convicted of beating to death a jewelry store owner and then tying up his wife during a robbery, they are being sentenced today.
Yeah, you remember this case. Carlos Hernandez and Joshua Zuazo were found guilty earlier this year in the death of Hussein Murray and the unlawful imprisonment of his wife, Linda, who thankfully did survive the ordeal. Before we get you into court, here's a look back at this case.
A year ago, you're going to hear that Linda Murray and her husband, Hussein Murray, who would also go by the name Sam, were enjoying the fruits of their 54 years of marriage. That life that they were living and were expecting to continue to live came to an abrupt end starting on October 10th of 2024 when there was a knock on the door.
And this is what I am prepared to concede today, is that Mr. Hernandez did not work alone. The question for you as Joshua Zuazo's jurors is whether he is the second man.
We got one down. We got one down. Is he dead? Go fix. We got one down. Shot in the head.
What happens when you're asking about your husband?
Zuazo tells me that he's sleeping, and I know there's blood on his vest. And I start screaming, and Hernandez hits me in the face to cover my mouth.
Defendant Hernandez started a year before with his contact with Mr. Murray. He had personal contact at his pawn shop in Hamtramck a year before.
But there's quite a difference between what you're able to perceive in all of the videos that have been shown to you and take a good look at who that second person is. And ask yourself, is that really proof beyond a reasonable doubt that it's Joshua Zuazo or is it somebody else?
Count 1, first-degree felony murder. Guilty as charged of first-degree felony murder. Count 2, unlawful imprisonment. Guilty as charged.
For count 1, first-degree felony murder, the jury finds defendant Hernandez guilty as charged of this charged first-degree felony murder. Count 2, unlawful imprisonment, the jury finds defendant Hernandez guilty as charged.
All right, that was the trial. We remember that. And whether the key witness there was the wife. You know, she had survived, lost her husband in such a horrible way. These guys were just trying to steal money and they end up killing the guy in the basement. Let's go back now. Let's go into the courtroom, watch the sentencing from the beginning.
5-47 on the docket, People versus Carlos Hernandez and People versus Joshua Zuazo. Case number 2024-291-945-FC and 2024-291-950-FC.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. May it please the court. John Petrofest and Andrew McGarrow on behalf of the people.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Michael McCarthy, P30169, on behalf of Joshua Zuazo. He's seated in the jury box.
I'll let Michelle Lofton on behalf of Carlos Hernandez, who is seated in the jury box as well.
Great, good afternoon to all of you. Date and time for sentencing. I have had an opportunity to review the pre-sentence report. Is there any additions, deletions, or corrections as it pertains to Mr. Zuazo?
Your Honor, as to the pre-sentence report, no. I do not have any objections to the personal background information regarding Mr. Zuazo.
They can both stand up. They're being sentenced. Stand up.
And Mr. Zuazo, when I met a few days ago, we went through the report together, and he confirmed that the report itself is accurate. I do have one objection to raise to a sentencing guideline assessment, but beyond that, as far as the report itself goes, no objections.
Well, which guideline?
It is OV, or offense variable 19, and the assessment is for 10 points for otherwise interfere with the administration of justice. And what I would relate, my understanding of the factual record, is that Mr. Zuazo was arrested, I believe, on the 14th day of October last year. He was on a job site. A SWAT team came in to make that arrest. He was cooperative at the time. He did not otherwise interfere with the administration of justice. That was the first time he had any encounter with law enforcement as far as the investigation in this case goes. And I don't know of any time after his arrest that he otherwise interfered with the administration of justice. So it's for that reason that I'm raising an objection to the assessment of 10 points for OV 19. And I will tell the court that the total score is 120 points, the offense variable score. And so it's not going to make any difference in terms of what the guideline range is, but I don't want, as trial counsel on behalf of Mr. Zuazo, to let what I believe the ruling is to go unchallenged.
And just to be clear, we're obviously not talking about the felony murder. You're talking about the guidelines as they pertain to count 2 and 3.
That's correct.
Okay, what's the people's position?
Your Honor, the people believe that it's properly scored. The fact that the Sheriff's Office very efficiently tracked down the defendant and had him arrested at his house doesn't negate what he did between the murder and his arrest, which was the fact that he tried to get rid of the evidence. In fact, defendant Hernandez had some of his evidence in his possession. He also was involved in having the vehicle that had been used in that part of the arson of that, and also the fact that the charge itself for those 2 counts does say that it was in perpetration of escaping the conviction of getting away from flight with a felony. So it's actually built into the charge.
My recollection is that the defendant Zuazo went about his normal life after having committed the offense, that he went to work and it was an attempt to pretend or act as if none of this had occurred. So I do think that the OV's properly scored and that he did obstruct justice by not cooperating and participating in that aftermath of this murder. Anything else?
No, that is...
Judge, regarding Mr. Zuazo, before we leave him to talk about Mr. Hernandez, we have to address the habitual offender notice, which was properly given. People believe that all 3 of those convictions are referenced in the PSI. I believe the defendant acknowledged the PSI was correct. The first one, the habitual regarding a prior conviction for a prisoner possessing a weapon that occurred in the year 2015. That's referenced in the PSI as number 6 of 7. The second prior conviction, which was an armed robbery conviction out of 2010, was also referenced in the PSI as number 5 of 7. And the third prior conviction for a felony receiving, concealing stolen property of a motor vehicle out of 2005 is reference number 4 out of 7. I do think the court needs to take notice of that. For the record, it does affect the guidelines.
And you agree that that's accurate, Mr. McCarthy?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, the court is going to take
Mr.
notice.
Zuazo confirmed all of those convictions were went through the report this past Saturday.
Okay, all right, the court's going to take notice of the defendant is in fact being sentenced as a habitual 4.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, Ms. Lofton, any changes on behalf of defendant Hernandez?
Nothing to the report, but I do have 2 separate guideline issues that I'd like to address.
Okay, go ahead.
OV1, this is in conviction count 2 of 3, so the unlawful imprisonment. OV1 is currently scored at 10 points. OV1 is aggravated use of a weapon. 10 points should be scored if the victim was touched by any other type of weapon. In all of the testimony that was presented, I don't believe that it was proven or even mentioned that a weapon was used. If we are to believe that this assault took place by fists, I say that it absolutely should not be scored. He wasn't touched by a weapon. Mr. Hernandez is not charged with any offenses relating to a weapon, so I don't believe it's properly scored. OV2 also piggybacks on that same line of thinking.
All right, we're going to get in a quick break, but when we come back, we'll have more of the sentencing hearing. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Court TV Live, along with Kelly Craft and Ted Rowlands. We're heading back to Michigan now. We've been following the sentencing hearing for defendants Carlos Hernandez and Joshua Zuazo.
The 2 men were each found guilty of felony murder earlier this year for killing 72-year-old Hussein Murray after posing as utility workers to get into his home.
Yeah, they said there was a gas leak inside his house. It came back twice, had a cliff, they had the whole thing, badges and uniforms. He let him in and they killed him. We're about to hear some victim impact statements. Let's go into the courtroom right now.
OV2 is lethal potential of weapon possessed or used. He is currently scored at 1 point. 1 point should only be assessed. Says the offender possessed or used any other potentially lethal weapon. I argue that that was absolutely not proven at trial.
Oh, okay, people?
Judge, starting with her last argument first, the court is very aware that the testimony showed that the victim had and carried his sidearm. That sidearm was missing. It was never recovered, so he was possessed. It was missing. The defendants did take that weapon. He was in possession or aiding and abetting the possession of a weapon. So I think that is just logically consistent. And I think the court did hear that.
Does the weapon have to be used in the course of the crime?
One is the possession of it, correct? And then for her first argument, you heard the testimony of both the first responders who described the scene and initially thought that it was gunshots. That's how horrific the scene was to them. And then you heard the medical examiner's testimony talking about the blunt force trauma, indicating that a weapon was also consistent with being used in that. There was also the weights that were found right next to him that had lots of blood on it. I believe that you could find from the preponderance of the evidence presented that that's properly scored.
All right, the court does find that OV1 is properly scored at 10. The images that the court viewed as it pertained to the victim, Mr. Murray here, certainly could be described as being brutal in nature and not likely to have just been able to have been committed by fist. So there were items within that basement that could have been used as a weapon. So the court does think OV1 is properly scored at 10. And conversely, OV2 is properly scored at 1. Defense's objections are noted for the record. All right, any other changes as it pertains to the PSI for Defendant Hernandez?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, we're going to get to allocution.
Judge, I hate to interrupt, but again, for the habitual offender notice for Mr. Hernandez, I believe it needs to be acknowledged on the record regarding the habitual that has been filed. He has 3 prior convictions for felonies, 1 in 2012 for prisoner or attempted possession of a weapon. That's number 5 to 7 in the PSI. A 2006 conviction, 3rd degree criminal sexual conduct. That's listed as number 3 of 7 in the PSI. And a prior conviction for felon in possession of a firearm in 2006. That's listed as number 4 of 7 in the PSI. And I believe those should be taken notice of for the record.
All right, Ms. Lofton, you agree with that?
I agree.
All right, the court is going to take notice that Defendant Hernandez is also a habitual fourth offender. All right, so before we get to allocution, I'll obviously give the parties an opportunity to speak. It's my understanding you have some victims who would like to speak
Yes,
first.
the 3 sons would like to speak briefly, Judge.
Would you like the defendants to remain standing or be seated during the statement?
They can stand.
Maggie Bird, if you could approach. State your name for the record, please.
Definitely. Hussein Murray. Good afternoon, Your Honor. I have a lot on my heart that I could say to you. My brothers are going to speak as well, so to be mindful of the court's time, I'm just going to read a short poem that my mother wrote to express her feelings about this, and my brothers will speak on my behalf as well. They have stolen my sunshine. They have stolen my happiness. They have stolen my reason for living. They have stolen the love of my life. The world is darker now without the love of my life, without my companion of 54 years. The plans we made will never come true. The sadness and tears will never end. I want to scream. I want to yell. I want to throw things against the wall. But all I can do is keep it inside for the rest of my life. Thank you.
You can state your name for the record.
Hussein Murray.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my dad first, just that he was kind and warm. He was a very brave man, especially after caring for my grandmother who was dying. He became gentle in a way that I had never expected. And he did that at the age of 70 years old, I might add. He was the rock that our entire family could depend on. You know, he never let anyone down. He sacrificed his whole life. He never really took vacations, never had fancy things, never had fancy cars, extravagant dinners. He always made sure that everybody was safe and secure, cared for. Unfortunately, he was just in the time where he was starting to enjoy his life and plan on retirement, just now starting to go on vacations with his grandkids, but that tragically ended. And in this impact statement, he is the primary victim. His life was stolen. He'll never get to see his grandkids graduate college or have their own children or get married. He'll never get to enjoy his retirement with my mother, who's also a victim in this crime. She is...
Still with us, criminal defense attorney Marie Pereira. Marie, hearing the family there speak victim impact statements, such a tragic loss, and you can feel they're just going through a really tough time.
I remember this case, and I remember, I had some really strong opinions on it. I think it's terrible that something like that happens inside your house. And like Ted said, they came back twice. So the second time, the wife was like, the first time she was like, it's too late. Something is wrong here. But yet they came back. They had the premeditation, they persisted, and the wife was present when it happened. She survived, and she probably doesn't even understand why. So the victim impact statement is for the judge to really understand the nature of the crime and the aftermath, and to also take that into account for each defendant, their criminal history, their lack of remorse, the recidivism, whether or not weapons were used. And I think the attorneys for the convicted men are doing a good job, and they're making sure, even at this stage, that the judge has the correct tools after the PSI, and the judge understands the different points that apply to the sentencing. I mean, this is how our system works, but I feel like they should be put in prison for the rest of their lives without a possibility of parole. This case, caught on camera, was so heinous.
Yeah, it sure was. The way that they worked their way in, and such an elaborate scheme to steal, which, by the way, there was no safe there. He didn't keep his valuables at his house for this exact reason. And so they really got nothing. He loses his life, and now they're going to lose their freedom, likely for the rest of their lives. And that, boy, what a heartbreaking poem that was written by the widow. Let's get a break. More. We'll find out what the judge decides for these two after this.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh.
Her husband now charged with her murder.
All eyes on this accused killer.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight, on Closing Arguments, unpacking the evidence against Brian Walsh as he stands trial for the murder of his wife. We'll show you everything you may have missed from today's gripping testimony.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Back now to Michigan, where two men are facing sentencing for posing as utility workers and then killing a man. This took place last year right inside his own home.
Carlos Hernandez and Joshua Zuazo were convicted of murder and unlawful imprisonment earlier this year after 72-year-old Hussein Murray, the owner of the house, ended up dead. He owned a local pawn shop, was killed in what investigators described as a planned robbery that went wrong.
Let's go back into the courtroom now. We've been listening to those victim impact statements from the victim's son.
Or trauma, a loss I cannot even imagine. Losing someone that you've been married to for that long, dedicated and lovingly. Also, I can't imagine the way she feels the violation of the sanctity of her home, some place where you're supposed to feel refuge and safe. I hope that she has that feeling, because I don't know if I would ever have it again. She'll never get to see his warm, smiling face or his warm embrace. We will never have the safety of knowing that he has had our back because he's no longer with us. My family has had a significant impact emotionally. We have suffered, school has suffered from depression. My daughter has had trouble making friends. I have had severe depression. My father was my hero, and I couldn't get the idea of his murder out of my head whenever I would remember him. And that is something that I will never forgive the defendants for, because anytime I remember any of these warm, wonderful things about my father, I also think about his last moments of terror, thinking that my mother is going to die as well. I will never forget that. And I hope that the court takes that into its determination today. In my broader family, everyone has been devastated. Every day we go to work is a trial of our patience and our fortitude, because everything there is tainted with his presence. He filled the place with joy, and his presence is missed every day. I would say that someone could be forgiven for something like this should they ask for it, but I don't see that the defendants are remorseful in the least. And I would also hope that the court would take that into consideration. Another consideration I hope is taken into account is that he is the second jeweler to be murdered in as many years over money. I think that in order to make sure that this doesn't happen, we need to make sure that all parties that are accompanied to this crime are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. That's my wish, I hope. That's it. Thank you.
Please your name for the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Abdi Murray, the eldest son. I'm Abdi Hussein Murray, the eldest son of Hussein Abdi Murray and Linda Murray. Your Honor, you've heard enough statements of the way crime has shattered families to last you a lifetime. It's part of the burden you bear as a public servant. It's a burden I am grateful you had the fortitude to bear for us. Sentencing is a time when we imperfect vessels of justice try to fit the sentence with the crime, with the consequences with the sin. And that's what's happened here. It really is sin. We call it crime, but it's a sin. It's a grievous sin, a sin that took a vibrant life never to be replaced on this side of heaven, a sin that shattered my mom's life and her sense of security. You know, my dad was larger than life. He was generous to a fault. He was strong as an ox, and he was brave as a lion. And with one act of trust, based on one act of deceit, planned deceit, the lion that protected my mom was slain. Carlos Hernandez and Joshua Zuazo robbed my mom of her lifelong companion, her husband of 54 years. They snatched away his grandkids' futures of seeing him light up a room at their graduations, at their weddings, at the birth of their kids so he could have grandkids with my mom. Our very large family looked to him in so many ways, emotionally, spiritually, financially. So when they robbed my mom of her husband, they robbed us all. My brothers and I were robbed of our hero, our counselor, and just dad. But another robbery happened after my dad's murder, and that was the robbery of our dignity. You know, Carlos Hernandez and Joshua Zuazo are guilty of this sin. They're guilty of this crime, and it was obvious. It was painfully obvious. So very obvious that it took the juries less than an hour to convict them both. The mountain of evidence leading to a guilty verdict was absolutely inevitable. Absolutely inevitable. And of course, I believe strongly in the defendant's right to a fair and just and speedy trial. And this court did an amazing job of ensuring that they got that right to be exercised. It's a right that I believe in heavily. It's a right for every human being and every citizen of this country to have, and I would defend that right to a fair trial. But just because you have the right to a fair trial doesn't mean making us sit through a week of it was the right thing to do. It was not the right thing to do. They could have exercised another right, and that right is to plead guilty, to own their sin, to do at least one thing that could have been a testimony to this community and their families and everyone else about what it means to own sin, to own up to the consequences and to bear those consequences. Instead, they chose to make my mom sit in that box and testify and relive the worst day of her life. They chose to make us relive our private hells. They chose to make us watch and hear and listen to forensic evidence about the violent way my father met his end at their hands. They chose to make us sit through text messages where they planned a heist that would get them the house of their dreams and the yard they've always longed for. My mom and my dad, who came from virtually nothing, worked their whole lives to get the big house and the yard. And Joshua Zuazo and Carlos Hernandez descended upon that house with envious eyes. And they made us sit through a week of that at the trial. Not to mention the preliminary hearing. All the while knowing they were guilty, but banking on the slimmest of chances, and the chances were exceedingly infinitesimally slim, that they would get out of that guilt, or that they would get less than the maximum sentence. What that tells me, Your Honor, is that there is not yet any repentance in their heart for the sins they have committed. And that tells me they have not yet fully come to terms with the enormity of the damage, with the size of the crater, with the vastness of their sin. It tells me that the only way they will ever really truly understand the depth of what they've done to us and to the community is for them to spend the rest of their lives in prison and never get out. Their sin has lifelong consequences for us, and their sin should have lifelong consequences for them, and the law of the land provides for that. And maybe then, and this is a hope I have for you guys, maybe then you'll see what's happened, the depth and the consequences of this whole thing. I don't think it's going to take anything less.
All right, we're going to slip in a commercial break. The heartbreak there in that Michigan courtroom. We'll have more of the sentencing hearing. Plus, Matt Johnson with an update on Walsh. Stay with us. We're expecting Anna Walsh's boss to testify after the lunch.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. We begin this hour in Massachusetts, where we've been following day 7 of the disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Court is expected to get back underway at any moment. You can see the fan there. We have our camera pointed towards that. And the voir dire of a key witness in the case is expected to happen. Anna's husband, Brian Walsh, stands accused of first-degree murder in her death. Now, her body has yet to be found and probably will never be found. And joining me now in the studio with the latest from today's testimony is Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson. Matt, great to see you as always. Now, earlier today, the criminalist, he took the stand and he started the day. He had been on, I think, basically for most of the day yesterday. Continued to take the stand today, face some cross. Tell us about it.
Key witness, big day there in Dedham, Massachusetts. The criminalist who processed the crime scene, the Cohasset home, was back on the stand for cross. That's how the day started. And the defense, wow, they were firing some important questions, focusing on a few things, including not all of the cleaning supplies that we saw so much about yesterday that were bought at Lowe's, $460 worth, were used. They didn't appear to be used in the Cohasset home. And there was no blood spatter detected in the home as well. Take a listen.
You told us on direct examination that you were looking for blood, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury briefly, or in your own words, what you consider to be, as a forensic specialist, blood spatter evidence?
Blood spatter in general is blood in flight.
And there was nothing in this home that you're aware of that could be described as blood spatter evidence?
That is correct.
Did you test all areas of Chief Justice Cushing Highway?
No.
How does cleaning a house impact your ability to find blood or trace materials?
If it was thoroughly cleaned, I would imagine the test results would be negative.
Does washing the walls impact your ability to find blood?
Yes, it does.
What type of cleaning materials would impact your ability to find blood or trace materials?
Virtually any type of cleaning material, bleach, alcohol, ammonia, anything, even water if it dilutes the sample to an extensive amount.
Walsh paying close attention to that testimony today. Here's the outside of that house. Court TV, during our investigation 3 years ago, were there. It's a massive property. Still surprising, though, Michael, that not all of the house, or at least the basement, was sprayed or detected for blood. I mean, we see that all the time in documentaries, and true crime fans know that, and this jury might expect that and have questions about the collection of evidence here. But also, the blood spatter not being detected, that's also going to be big for the defense. We may hear that in closing remarks, because remember, the big question, you've been talking about it right now, is if she was killed and how she was killed in that house.
Yeah, exactly. That would be an issue. Certainly that would help the defense, something they would certainly mention in closing. We got a busy afternoon coming up in court. What should we be looking for? Okay,
so we're looking for that key witness possibly taking the stand, the former boss who celebrated New Year's Eve with this couple. Anna Walsh's boss, who was with the couple before she died and was reported missing. Jem Mutlu told reporters in Boston after her disappearance that he didn't see anything unusual before she disappeared. They were celebrating. Brian cooked a dinner. It was a lavish meal. They were laughing. They played with the kids. But he did suspect foul play afterwards. Now, he is going to be questioned outside of the presence of the jury when everyone's back from lunch. That is at any moment now. We are waiting. We are standing by for that. He could also potentially be maybe called as the last witness by prosecutors, if he is called by prosecutors. Because you and I, Michael, we were talking off camera, and your opinion is, your analysis, he might not really help the prosecution case right now, other than the timeline.
Yeah, I would agree, exactly. He may help with that timeline. He can talk about the last time he saw her, which was the last time anyone other than Brian Walsh saw her. So again, it could solidify that timeline. But you're right, he would make probably one of the better witnesses as a last witness for the state. So we shall see.
We shall see. And then we'll see whether or not he is going to testify. This defendant will take the stand. I was asking his defense attorney on the courthouse steps the other day, and I brought that on your show, and he said no comment. But in those opening statements, he was really alluding to the fact that Brian Walsh wants to share his story. He's the only one that can bring in that evidence that he found his wife dead and stumbled upon the body.
Yeah, I would have to agree, although I think it really opens him up to a very difficult cross-examination. He is already a proven liar, so we'll have to see, right? A convicted liar. So we'll have to see. All right, Matt Johnson, as always, a pleasure to have you on the program. All right, folks, I want to head back to Michigan now, where two men, actually, quickly, I want to tell you, we're looking at that courtroom again in Dedham, Massachusetts. We are awaiting their return from lunch, at which point, as Matt mentioned, there will be this voir dire of that potentially last witness by the state. So we shall see, and we'll take you there as soon as that gets going. That should be some interesting testimony and voir dire as well. So we'll see how that turns out. And as I said earlier, we want to head to Michigan now while we're waiting for that, where two men convicted of killing a jewelry store owner is being sentenced today. Now, Carlos Hernandez and Joshua Zuazo were both found guilty earlier this year of murder and unlawful imprisonment after dressing up as utility workers in order to gain access to the home of a local jewelry store owner, Hussein Murray. Now, the two men then bound Murray and his wife in an attempt to rob the home. Murray was eventually beaten and choked to death. I want to go back to court now to see more of today's sentencing.
Ms. Lawson, any allocution on behalf of defendant Hernandez?
Yes, Your Honor. As to count one, obviously, as Mr. McCarthy has stated, the court has not given many options. As to count 2 and 3, guidelines are scored at the bottom end of 62 months to 228 months. My client is requesting that I ask the court to sentence to the bottom of the guidelines on count 2 and count 3. My client likewise is going to decline his right to make a statement. He intends to appeal, and I do have that form filled out.
Any statement you'd like to make to the court on defendant Hernandez prior to your sentencing?
No, ma'am.
All right, you know, this court, having sentenced many individuals over the years, it is rarely does the court see this level of depravity, this level of arrogance and greed, because that's what that was all based on. You could care less about a man's life in order for you to fulfill the fantasy of the life that you wanted. The white picket fence, the house. His life meant nothing to you. The idea that there is such a loss of humanity in your actions. You go to his home the evening before. He looks at you eye to eye. Eye to eye, and he's kind. Most people would not be kind at 10 o'clock in the evening. That doesn't stop you. That just alters your plan to go back the next day. And you go back the next day with the intent to deceive and invade. And every single step you could have taken to change that at that point when you walked in that house, every step on your way to that basement, on your way down with him, you could have said, okay, enough is enough. It's gone too far. But you couldn't, because it's a cowardice act, because that's exactly what you are. It is pathetic. Your actions are absolutely pathetic. You thought you came up with this brilliant plan. You boasted about it in messages, that you had it all figured out. There's signs, there's timing. You got it all figured out. What you didn't realize was every single thing that you did, every little pathetic cowardice act that you did, led to a trail of evidence that ended up being copious amounts of evidence that led in very quick convictions with 2 separate juries. None of us know exactly what happened in the basement when you two went down. Obviously, we didn't have a video to be able to see it. We see the aftermath of what happens when you go down there. But I am certain that Mr. Murray fought you with the courage of a man who spent his life protecting his home and his family. And I hope whatever those last words he said to you, or whatever that last moment that he looked at you, haunts you for the rest of your life. Because you see, one breath of Mr. Murray's life doesn't amount to 1 ounce of your dignity or worth. He was a loyal man. He was a hard-working man. How dare you? It is the sentence of the court as to defendant Zuazo, as to count 1, homicide, felony murder, habitual for the defendant served his natural life in the Michigan Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole. As to count 2 and 3, it's unlawful imprisonment as a habitual 4. It is the sentence of the court. The defendant served 228 days to 80 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections with the 421 days of credit. Restitution is $2,819. The state cost is $204. Crime victim rate is $130. You have an absolute right to file an appeal with the Michigan Court of Appeals. If you can't afford an attorney, the court will appoint one for you. You have 42 days to make that request. As to the
Judge, may I interject?
Sure.
You indicated 228 days.
220 months.
That's what I thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As to defendant Hernandez, this is case number 2024-291945. As to count 1, it is the sentence of the court that defendant served his natural life in the Michigan Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole. As to counts 2 and 3, it is the sentence of the court that defendant served 228 months to 80 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. He'll receive his 423 days of credit. It's $28.19 for restitution, $204 for state costs. Crime victim rate is $130. And I didn't say this, I know Mr. Zuazo was removed. It's no contact whatsoever directly or indirectly with Linda Murray and or the Murray family. You have an absolute right to file an application for me to appeal with the Court of Appeals. If you can't afford an attorney, the court appoints one for you. You have 42 days to make that request.
Your Honor, as to Mr. Zuazo, who has been removed from the courtroom, he executed the request for appellate counsel form, and I'm going to hand it to your clerk before I leave.
Okay, and Mr. McCarthy, do you want him brought back in for you to say that in his presence? Because I'd be happy to do that.
If we could do that would be great.
Let's bring him back in. And Ms. Lofton?
And for the record, Your Honor, my client has also executed his right to appeal, and it will be tendered to your clerk. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Of course.
Will we just approach for a second?
All right, so as you just heard, Judge Yasmin Poles sentences Carlos Hernandez, the gentleman you see there, as well as his partner in crime, Joshua Zuazo, to life in prison without the possibility of parole, commenting on the depravity of the crime, and also something that I thought as well as this case was going on. They go the night before. The gentleman is nice to them, he is respectful, tells them to come back, and they had all that time to think about what they were doing, or perhaps doing the right thing, and they chose not to. So she sentenced them here, life without parole, for their natural life. All right, let's bring in our guest for this hour. Joining us, Boston-based criminal defense attorney Tim Bradel. Tim, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me here on the program. I want to get your reaction to not only the sentence here, I think that was clearly expected considering the crime, but also some of the words that the judge had to say.
Yeah, Michael, no surprises here on this case. What a heinous set of facts. What a difficult position for the defense lawyers to be in. Horrible, horrible crime for Mr. Murray. 11 grandkids, three sons, you know, so much dignity, and it's a tough one. And the judge did a really nice thing. I thought she handled the case really well. She seems on the young side. She was very, she had a steady hand at the tiller. You know, she said some nice things about, you know, her impressions that based on Mr. Murray's character, you know, he probably fought to the end and defended, you know, his wife like he always defended his family. And, you know, it means a lot. It means the world to a family, I think, when the judge sort of takes a personal interest like that and, you know, comments about the what must have happened and the dignity of the deceased here.
Yeah, we heard that last victim impact statement talking about the fact that by not taking a plea in this case, where they were on video, was clear they were there. I mean, as a defense attorney, I can understand fighting it. But from his perspective, he wanted the court to take into account the fact that they did not take this plea and they forced his wife to go into court. She was a victim in this case as well, to go into court and talk about the worst day of her life. I thought that was really poignant. Is that something judges do and often consider in cases like this?
Acceptance of responsibility is a big factor. You know, if you put the family through this, you know, for what? For playing a video in court? You know, it's just a, in this case, it seemed almost a needless exercise. Obviously, it's their absolute right, and they can do it. But, you know, it's sometimes in your best interest to fold your tent and accept responsibility and try to get out of there with something reasonable, something that's not going to end your life, something, you know, figuratively speaking anyway, but something that is manageable. You know, I say that to clients all the time, that there are two kinds of sentences. There's sentences that, you know, you come out, the world is a different place. You're in there for decades. You know, you come out, no one's around, no girlfriends, no family. Maybe your parents have passed away. You know, it's a life-ending sentence. That's what they got here. There's nothing in their future for them. Sometimes you want to cut your losses, try to get out. You know, maybe you get out when you're 60, 70, you know, you make these calculations. Here, you know, as a lawyer, you have to take what you get. And these guys didn't seem too, you know, too smart to, you know, this is probably the only thing they ever hatched in their life. That was any sort of a sophisticated plan to do anything. And they paid for it.
Yeah, it was an intricate plan. It looked like they were probably planning on doing a lot more of these, kind of the way the testimony played out. They both said that they do, in fact, plan to appeal this case, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Having watched the trial, not sure there's a lot there for them to appeal, but of course, they will exercise that right. Tim, thank you so much for that.